Widowed and alone, she washed the sheriff's feet just to manage the rent on her house, struggling to survive after her husband's death. Each day was an effort simply to remain standing, until one sheriff demanded more than she could give. At that moment, a solitary rancher appeared, firm, resolute, placing himself between her and the danger. In an instant, he changed everything, and her life would never be the same. Isabel would always remember those days with a warmth in her chest. At her husband's side, life had felt complete, a simple routine yet filled with love. Mornings began with the aroma of fresh coffee and his smile, so calm, so steady, that it soothed every fear and worry. At night, the warmth of his tight embrace made everything feel in its right place. She felt safe, loved, and believed that nothing could shatter that humble happiness. But life, as it so often does, revealed its cruel side. The signs came subtly at first. Low fevers, constant fatigue, a weary look Isabel tried not to notice. She held his hand through the cold nights, whispered her prayers, felt each trembling breath, and hoped it was only a passing illness. But it wasn't. The sickness spread quickly and mercilessly, stripping away not only his health, but also the fragile hope Isabel clung to. She spent countless days and sleepless nights caring for him with unrelenting devotion, wiping away the sweat, preparing broths, reading words of comfort that barely pierced the grief weighing on their hearts. And when he finally slipped away, leaving behind a silent house and her broken heart, Isabel felt as if the entire world had vanished. The bed seemed too large, the furniture colder, and the wind through the window carried away the last traces of joy. Isabel lived in a rented house, small and simple, but now it felt far too big for her. The rent weighed heavily, and she often wondered how she would manage to pay the bills. Food on the table grew scarce, and each day became a silent battle against hunger and poverty. Desperate to survive, she accepted humiliating work. One of the most degrading tasks was washing the feet of the town's influential men. She would bow before powerful figures, her heart split between shame and anger. Every forced smile, every polite word, was a reminder that her life had changed forever, that the freedom she once knew now carried a bitter price. Among Isabel's clients were some of the town sheriffs, respected, feared, arrogant men who felt entitled to treat others with disdain. One of them in particular began drawing dangerously close. His lingering stares, his comments masked as courtesy, his invasive gestures made her uneasy. She tried to remain composed, reminding herself constantly that she needed the money. Ignoring him was her only defense, though every touch, every insinuating word was silent torture. Despite the fear and humiliation, Isabel had no choice. She needed to survive, and each passing day taught her how to bury her shame and turn pain into quiet strength. But fate seemed ready to intervene in an unexpected way, and Isabel had no idea that this dark path would soon lead her to someone who would change her life forever. She could not yet imagine that her story was about to be turned upside down, bringing danger, courage, and an unforeseen spark of hope in the midst of what felt like endless darkness. The sun was already high when Isabel finished another exhausting day of work. Her arms ached, her hands were cracked, and her knees throbbed from kneeling at other men's feet. Every movement, every effort reminded her that life now demanded sacrifices she had never foreseen. Washing the feet of important townsmen, including sheriffs who strutted with arrogance, she fought not to think of the humiliation hidden behind each forced smile. As she scrubbed the last stain from the boot of a burly man, Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. One of the sheriffs, notorious for his ruthless, unscrupulous ways, approached slowly, studying her every move. His eyes betrayed his intentions, and his voice broke the silence. "Didn't expect to find you here so soon, my lovely Isabel. Working hard, as always," he said, leaning closer than he should. Isabel's stomach clenched. She drew in a deep breath, lifted her chin, and tried to steady her voice. "Just doing my work, sir." Her words came out stronger than she expected, though fear trembled beneath her courage. The sheriff's smile twisted into something dangerous, never reaching his eyes. He stepped closer, shrinking the space between them. "You know, Isabel, you could be my bride." His voice slithered like poison, both promise and threat. "I could change your life, free you from this misery that clings to you." Isabel frowned and backed away, unsettled and afraid. She forced herself to breathe, to hold her composure. "No, I don't want that." His smile vanished, replaced by a shadowed look of rage. His tone dropped, harsh and threatening. "You think you can defy me, Isabel? I told you, you could be mine, and I don't take no for an answer." Before she could react, he seized her arm and tried to drag her away from prying eyes. Panic ignited inside her like wildfire. Isabel felt her world about to collapse. Alone, she had no way to fight back. Terror froze her thoughts, every muscle tense, her heart pounding wildly. Then, as if fate had finally decided to intervene, the sharp rhythm of hooves cut through the air. The sheriff turned in confusion, and Isabel felt a flicker of hope she hadn't known in years. A tall man, astride a black horse, advanced toward them with steady, resolute strides, every movement radiating strength and courage. Without hesitation, the solitary rancher pushed between them, holding the reins in one hand and placing the other firmly on Isabel's shoulder, pulling her out of harm's reach. The sheriff staggered back, startled by the stranger's audacity, though fury still burned in his eyes. He would not forget this challenge. The man stood unwavering, a wall of presence shielding Isabel without flinching. When the sheriff finally retreated, realizing he could not press further, the rancher released her. Isabel collapsed to her knees, trembling, breath ragged, unable to form a single word. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her eyes brimming with tears, her voice faltering between fear and relief. "Someone who doesn't allow injustice," he replied, his voice steady and calm, carrying the weight of authority. Isabel looked at him, bewildered and in awe. For the first time since her husband's death, someone had truly cared enough to protect her. Something deep stirred within her, a blend of gratitude, surprise, and curiosity. You didn't just save my life," she said, swallowing the sobs that threatened to rise. "You also saved my child's life." Instinctively, she placed her hand on her belly, where she could feel the faint movement of the baby. The rancher froze, startled by the revelation. What had begun as a simple act of rescue suddenly became a doubled responsibility. He looked at Isabel with grave seriousness, understanding the weight of that moment and the strength he would need to bear it. "Come with me," he said without hesitation, guiding her toward his ranch. She didn't fully understand what was happening, nor why this stern, reserved man had decided to protect her with such intensity. But at that instant, the only certainty was that he had changed her path forever. As they rode, Isabel felt a torrent of fear, relief, and hope. For the first time in months, she believed she might begin again, that life, after so much pain, might still hold a chance for happiness. The rancher remained silent, yet Isabel sensed behind those cold eyes a history of pain, a past that explained his sternness and reserve. She knew in that moment that her life would never be the same. This mysterious, solitary, and powerful man would become essential to her story, someone who could protect not only her, but also the child she carried. And deep inside, Isabel felt that his intervention wasn't only an act of courage, it was a sign that something new, something unexpected, was about to be born in her life. When they reached the ranch house, Isabel was still tense, though relieved. The mysterious man, stern yet composed, opened the door calmly and led her inside. The house was simple but well kept and welcoming, with wooden furniture that radiated rustic comfort. To her surprise, he had prepared a room just for her, clean, orderly, and with a soft bed that seemed to invite her into rest. "You'll stay here," he said, pointing to the room. "Make yourself comfortable." Isabel stepped inside slowly, marveling at the care put into every detail. For the first time in so long, she felt she had a safe space where she could recover from the humiliation and fear that had haunted her since her husband's death. Afterward, he guided her to the kitchen, where a simple but nourishing meal awaited. The aroma of homemade food filled the air, and Isabel realized that every gesture of his carried thoughtfulness and care. She sat at the table, still cautious, but unable to deny her gratitude. "Eat," he said, his tone firm but not unkind, leaving no room for refusal. "You need your strength." Isabel obeyed, and with each bite she felt the day's tension begin to melt away. It was strange to her, someone so reserved, so seemingly cold, showing such care without expecting anything in return. Every action, from the meal to his concern for her well-being, revealed that he truly cared. When the meal ended, he said nothing, only led her back to the room. Isabel lay down, exhaustion pressing heavily on her shoulders. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax, closing her eyes without fear. The rancher's silence filled the house, but it wasn't heavy. It was protective. Even in quiet, she felt he was watchful, guarding her safety. As night fell, Isabel replayed everything in her mind. The sheriff's assault, the courage of the man who had saved her, and the strange, powerful feeling of being so fiercely protected. She knew his presence would change her life, but she couldn't yet understand how this solitary man might break through the wall of fear and sorrow she carried. Lying in bed, Isabel closed her eyes and, for the first time in months, allowed herself to feel hope. Something new was stirring, something unforeseen. And in the stillness of the night, she realized that this mysterious, stern, powerful man had not only saved her life and that of her child, but had also begun to rebuild a world of trust and care in which she would never again have to feel alone. The next day began with the distant song of birds and the fresh scent of damp earth. Isabel awoke still weary in body, yet there was a different sensation, something lighter, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When she opened her eyes, she saw the rancher already awake, moving silently through the hallways of the house. "You're already up?" she asked, surprised, stretching lazily on the bed. He glanced at her with a faint smile, discreet yet strong. "I always rise early." "The sunrise waits for no one," he answered, his voice firm, carrying a mix of discipline and care. She chuckled softly, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in her chest, a mix of comfort and curiosity. He helped her rise and led her to the kitchen, where a simple but hearty breakfast was already prepared. The aroma of coffee and fresh bread filled the room, bringing an unexpected warmth to Isabel's heart. "Sit down, I'll bring the coffee," he said, pouring it carefully, ensuring it wasn't too hot. As they shared breakfast, Isabel felt compelled to break the silence about something that had been weighing on her. She drew a deep breath, studying the man before her, still mysterious, still guarded, yet already showing kindness in every gesture. "May I ask your name?" she said softly, a little shy. He lifted his eyes, and for a moment the kitchen filled with silence. Then, with a slight nod, he answered, "Tiago." Isabel smiled, relieved to finally put a name to the mysterious man who had changed her life. "Isabel," she replied, extending her hand, more a symbol than a formal gesture. "It's a pleasure to truly meet you, Tiago." He studied her for a moment, his expression serious, but in his eyes there was something different, almost a glimmer of recognition. "In pleasure, Isabel," he said, his voice steady but touched with an unexpected softness that made her heart race. That simple exchange of names, so ordinary to anyone else, carried a profound meaning here. For the first time since her husband's death, Isabel felt she could connect with someone in a genuine way, that she could begin to rebuild a life scarred by pain, now under Tiago's protection and care. "I want to help with the ranch chores," she said, feeling the need to be useful, to be part of his world. I know I need to take care of the baby, but I want to contribute." He regarded her carefully, weighing her words, then nodded. "All right, Isabel, but take it slow, and if you feel any discomfort, tell me immediately." She smiled, feeling lighter. That morning marked the beginning of a new rhythm, one that blended work, care, and the slow building of trust between them. And so, their days on the ranch began. Isabel tended to the animals, watered the crops, and learned to handle small tasks, always under Tiago's watchful eye. He worked tirelessly, always in motion, feeding the livestock, mending fences, checking irrigation, and managing the harvest. Yet despite his endless duties, he never failed to notice Isabel. Every gesture, every move she made, he observed closely, as if determined to ensure that nothing harmed her or placed her pregnancy at risk. When Isabel tried to carry something heavy or bend down to pick up a basket, Tiago would immediately appear at her side, adjusting the weight, offering support, or correcting her posture so she wouldn't hurt herself. He was meticulous, but never in an authoritarian way. His care was firm, yet carried a quiet tenderness that Isabel still couldn't fully understand. Each day brought small gestures that, little by little, began to break through the wall of distrust she had carried since her husband's death. He watched her constantly, sometimes only with his eyes, without saying a word, as if he simply wanted to make sure she was safe and comfortable. Isabel was surprised by such constant, detailed attention. No one had ever cared for her so completely, not even when her husband was still alive. "Are you all right?" he would ask in the simplest of moments, whether she bent down to pick something up from the ground, watered the vegetables in the garden, or sorted grains for the animals. She found herself smiling at his attentiveness, an involuntary, timid but sincere smile. Gradually she realized that Tiago, despite his cold and reserved demeanor, was showing a side few people ever saw, someone capable of caring with discipline, but also with tenderness and presence. He seemed to understand, more than anyone else, the importance of protecting not only Isabel's body, but also her heart and her trust, still fragile after so much suffering. The farm's daily routine, once just a space of labor, was transformed into a place of safety for Isabel. Her days were filled with light tasks, constant learning, and silent moments of closeness, where his presence alone was enough to make her feel protected. Tiago did not talk much about himself, but each gesture, each attentive glance, each carefully made correction conveyed a genuine and steady concern. Isabel began to realize she could trust him, depend on his protection, and accept that someone could care so deeply without asking for anything in return. At night, when Isabel retired to the room he had so carefully prepared for her, the feeling of safety remained. She knew that, even in silence, Tiago was alert, ready to act if needed. Every detail, from the care with meals, to his attentiveness to the smallest signs of her fatigue, to the discreet looks that sometimes met her own, reinforced the sense that, despite the pain of the past, life could still offer her affection, protection, and hope. And so, through daily work, constant care, and the silent glances that often met, Isabel began to feel that her life truly could change. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to believe that kindness still existed, that there was still space for hope to grow within her, and that this mysterious, solitary, strong man might become an essential part of the story now unfolding in her life. Each dawn, each quiet gesture of care solidified the idea that life, despite loss, could still offer security, affection, and perhaps a new beginning. The sun was already high in the morning sky when Isabel bent down in the garden to gather some corn. The smell of damp earth, mixed with the song of birds, brought a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She carried 2 heavy sacks when suddenly a small gasp escaped her lips. Tiago, who had been repairing a fence in the distance, immediately raised his head. Just hearing that sound was enough for him to drop his tools and run to her. "Isabel!" His voice rang out strong, heavy with concern. "What happened?" She leaned on one of the sacks, breathing deeply. Her face was flushed and her hand instinctively rested on her rounded belly. "Calm down," she said, trying to reassure him with a fragile smile. "It's nothing bad. It was just the baby." He kicked. Isabel looked at him, feeling the warmth of his presence and the strength of his hands. Slowly she gathered courage and took Tiago's calloused hands, intertwining them over her stomach. She felt the firm, protective touch of his palms, and a shiver of emotion ran through her. Tiago's eyes shone with surprise. He dropped to his knees before her without hesitation, placing his large, rough hand over hers, right on her belly. "I felt it," he murmured, his voice trembling as if it was something sacred. "He's strong. I feel so safe with you here," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "As if nothing could hurt us when you're around." Tiago gently pressed her hands against her belly, his strong fingers wrapping around hers with care, as though he were holding not only the baby's life, but hers as well. "I never thought anyone could make me feel this again," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Protection, hope, something I thought I had lost forever." She looked into his eyes, glistening with unshed tears, and felt the need to draw closer. Without realizing it, their faces leaned in, and their lips touched in a gentle but intense kiss. Isabel placed one hand on his shoulder, while the other remained over her belly, feeling both the baby's movements and the warmth of Tiago's hands. They sat together on the soil of the garden, surrounded by greenery, the smell of earth, and the song of the birds. The wind rustled the leaves around them, but nothing seemed to matter beyond the moment they shared. Tiago took a deep breath, summoning courage, and began to reveal a piece of the past he still carried with him. "I've never told anyone this, Isabel, but you deserve to know." He fixed his gaze on the horizon, his eyes distant and heavy with sorrow. "I was married once, and I dreamed of having a family, a child running across this farm. But during childbirth, I lost them both. His voice faltered, and he swallowed hard. "She didn't make it. Neither did the baby. Since then, this place has been empty, and so have I." Isabel placed her hand gently on his arm, squeezing with care, feeling the weight of the pain he still carried. "I'm so sorry, Tiago. No one should have to go through a pain like that." He looked at her then, vulnerable for the first time. "I promised myself I would never let anyone into my life like that again," he continued, his voice low and firm. "But you appeared out of nowhere, carrying this child, and made me feel once more that I can protect, care, believe." Isabel smiled through her tears and kept her hands over his, feeling the strength and safety in them. "Maybe it's because you never stopped being capable of love," she said softly. "You were only hiding it behind your silence." His gaze softened, and he once again rested his hands on her belly, now entwined with hers. A new movement from the baby made them both smile, deeply moved. "It's not just you two who are under my care anymore, Isabel. It's you who are giving me life back," he said, his voice husky yet steady. Sitting side by side on the garden soil, they remained there, feeling life itself stir within her. And for the first time, Tiago's painful past seemed to lose its grip in the face of the new hope growing before them. In Isabel's heart, a certainty blossomed that this solitary man, scarred by loss, could be the beginning of a new story. For her, and for the child soon to be born. 2 days had passed since that moment in the garden. Life on the farm followed its rhythm, with Isabel helping in the daily chores, and Tiago tending to the crops and the animals. With every gesture, every attentive glance, she felt more trust, more safety, but the calm that had just begun to take root would be violently shattered. The sun was already high as Tiago worked in the corral, reinforcing a fence that the winds of the past nights had knocked down. Sweat trickled down his face, and the rhythmic pounding of the hammer against the wood echoed across the fields. Isabel, from inside the house, watched him through the window with a discreet smile, feeling an unusual sense of peace every time she looked at that strong-armed man, as if, at last, the world had conspired in her favor. But the calm was torn apart by the sound of hooves. The ground shook. Horses emerged in the distance, raising a cloud of dust that blurred the horizon. 3 men appeared, and leading them astride a towering black stallion came the sheriff, the tyrant who had once believed Isabel could be his. His eyes, cold as blades, glinted with murderous fury. "So this is where you're hiding, Isabel," he spat, dismounting like a demon about to strike. "Your worthless farmer really thought he could defy me?" Tiago straightened slowly, letting the hammer drop to the ground. His fists clenched, his gaze unwavering. "You're not welcome here, Sheriff. Turn around and take your thugs with you." The sheriff let out a mocking laugh. "I didn't come to ask permission, Tiago. I came to end you and take back what's mine." He jerked his chin, and 2 hulking men dismounted, closing in around the corral. Tiago stepped forward, positioning himself between the intruders and the house. "Isabel doesn't belong to you, and she'll never again be intimidated by anyone. If you want to get through, you'll have to go over me first." A twisted smile curved the sheriff's thin lips. "I was waiting for you to say that, you stupid farmer." In a flash, he whipped out a rope and lunged like a snake, trying to lasso Tiago's neck. Tiago dodged at the last moment and retaliated with a clean punch to the sheriff's jaw. The crack echoed through the air, sending the sheriff staggering back 2 steps, spitting blood. "Shoot him!" the sheriff roared, crazed with rage. Before the thugs could draw their guns, Tiago seized a hoe leaning against a tree trunk and swung hard, striking the arm of the first man, who screamed in pain and dropped his revolver. The second thug charged with a dagger, but Tiago floored him with a brutal knee to the stomach. "Bastard!" the sheriff snarled, attacking from behind. In a coward's move, he finally managed to loop the rope around Tiago's neck. Tiago fought back, but the noose tightened mercilessly. His hands clawed instinctively at the rope, but the air was slipping away, his knees buckling. The sheriff pulled with savage delight, teeth clenched, savoring each second of his enemy's agony. "You'll die like a pig!" he bellowed as Tiago collapsed to his knees, nearly unconscious. Then a scream split the air. "Let him go now!" Isabel came running from the house, clutching a heavy piece of wood, tears of fury streaking her face. Without hesitation, she swung it with all her strength against the sheriff's head. The crack rang out like thunder. The sheriff staggered, stunned, and the rope loosened. Tiago fell forward, gasping desperately for air, as if clawing his way back from death itself. Isabel stood in front of him, trembling with terror, but ready to risk everything. She dropped the wood and knelt beside Tiago, wrapping him in an urgent, love-filled embrace. It's okay now," she repeated, her voice breaking as she ran her hands over his face. "I'm here. It's over, my love. It's over." Still gasping, Tiago clutched her tightly against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder out of rhythm. His arms encircled Isabel fiercely, as if that embrace were the only safe place left in the world. He buried his face in her neck, letting hot tears spill in a mix of pain and relief. Seeing the woman's courage and the farmer's unexpected resilience, the sheriff, coward as ever, stumbled backward. Clutching his wounded head, he signaled to his battered men. "We're leaving," he snarled, scrambling onto his horse. The thugs followed, fleeing at full gallop, a cloud of dust trailing in their wake. Isabel and Tiago remained locked in each other's arms, watching them disappear into the horizon. That night, the farm returned to silence, but fear still lingered in the air. Yet a week later, news spread across the region. The sheriff had finally been arrested after numerous anonymous reports and evidence handed in by townsfolk who had grown tired of suffering in silence. Accused of extortion, murder, abuse of authority and collusion with local criminals, he was stripped of his badge and dragged out of town like the outlaw he truly was. When the news reached the farm, Tiago and Isabel exchanged a silent glance. He slowly took her hand and pulled her into his arms, this time with tender gentleness. "Now, we can finally breathe in peace," he murmured, a light, genuine smile crossing his face. Isabel rested her head against his chest, listening to the sound of a heart that at last beat in peace. After the brutal confrontation and the long-awaited arrest of the corrupt sheriff, a breeze of relief seemed to sweep over the farm. It was as though the weight that had long crushed Isabel and Tiago's shoulders had finally been lifted. The nights became quiet again. Food regained its flavor, and for the first time in ages, they could sleep with the doors unlocked and their hearts at rest. Everything felt lighter. The earth seemed richer, the wind gentler, and hope, at last, began to take root. As the months went by, a new reason to smile arrived like a miracle. Isabel's belly had already grown round and firm, turning her body into a dwelling place for life. Tiago gazed at her with almost childlike tenderness, caressing her stretched skin as if thanking fate for the privilege of touching a dream. When the first pains came, the sky was still painted in shades of orange. The birth took place right there on the farm, with the help of supportive neighbors and an experienced midwife from the village. It was a moment of such overwhelming emotion that time itself seemed to stop. Isabel squeezed Tiago's hand tightly, groaning through her tears, while he did everything he could to remain steady, encouraging her between sweaty kisses on her forehead. And then a healthy cry echoed through the house. It was a boy, strong, rosy, perfect. "Welcome to the world, my son, Isaac," Isabel whispered, her voice still trembling as she received the baby in her arms. Tiago wept openly, his face pressed against her hair, marveling at the little miracle that now completed their home. Isaac, they had chosen together, a name of promise, of rebirth, of joy after the desert. The farm seemed to gain a new glow. The hens clucked with cheer, the orchard bore fruit in abundance, and the corral became the daily witness to the laughter of a child raised with love. Isabel would walk with Isaac in her arms at dusk, while Tiago, his eyes shining with pride, leaned against the fence, watching them, knowing that in the end, everything had been worth it. The sheriff was in the past. The fear was in the past. Love, courage, and family. Those remained. And on that land marked by scars, the most beautiful of beginnings was born. A woman who once had been a widow, defenseless and hunted, now walked with her head held high, because she finally had what had long been denied her: safety, love, and a whole family to call her own.